Everybody, welcome to GitLab's released webcast. At GitLab, we have one vision: everyone can contribute, and that really underscores absolutely everything we do. So I thank you very much for coming today to find out more about using GitLab. GitLab is where you collaborate on your projects. It's actually used by over 100,000 organizations, and you can check out our site to find out more about GitLab. My name is Heather McNamee. I'm the Developer Marketing Manager here at GitLab. And in this webcast, we're going to highlight all of the features that are available with 8.6. And it's nice because there's a special focus in a way on improved confidentiality that's available with this release. And Dao is going to walk us through that. And I'm also going to show you some great new resources for using GitLab Pages. And at the very end, we're going to share you some important community news. If you're watching us live, you will get a follow-up email with a recording and the slides to download. And if you're watching this as a recording, I say just please sign up to the newsletter so you don't miss any of the other webcasts. You're going to be asking questions as we go, and I can see some questions already coming into the question panel about the sound. So if you're watching us on Linux, we've heard that Chromium is so much better, and I hope that will help resolve some sound issues you might have. Our next webcast coming up is the GitLab Intro to CI. We're actually going to have the GitLab CI team talking with you, and they're brilliant at demystifying what continuous integration is and how it works in GitLab. And so even if you're new to continuous integration, GitLab's a really great way to get started. And if you're experienced with other systems, of course, you'll be curious to find out how ours works if you're already using GitLab. So I'd like to introduce our special guest, Dao Iman. He is the development lead at GitLab. And Dao, when I looked at your profile on the team page at GitLab, I saw that you were a merge request end boss, and I thought everybody would like to hear what that is.
That's right. Thank you, Heather, for having me in the first place. I will first explain a little bit about who I am, what I do as development lead, and then I'll get into that merge request end boss thing because it is indeed a pretty nice name, nice title. My name is Dao Iman. I live in the Netherlands, and I am development lead at GitLab. And what that means is that it's my responsibility to make sure the development process goes smoothly. And that every month, of course, we plan a lot of nice features, a lot of improvements, a lot of bug fixes. And it's my responsibility to make sure me, as well as the awesome development team that we have, that it gets into the next release. Of course, the developers are doing the grunt of the work, and I'm kind of looking over their shoulder and making sure everything goes smoothly. Then develop merge request end boss kind of ties into this, because one thing that we need to make sure is that every release is up to the quality standards that we are striving for every month. And as merge request end boss, me and my fellow end bosses are basically the people you have to go through to get your stuff into master. So if you submitted a merge request, whether you be a GitLab employee or a contributor from the community, what you will do is submit a merge request, and then one of us would come in and review it. And we're looking for a couple of things. We are making sure, of course, that the code is working and is clean. We're looking that the user interface is clear and consistent and easy to use. We're making sure that documentation has been written if that is appropriate. And of course, we need tests and tests that pass so that there are as few regressions as possible in future releases. So that's basically what I do as a merge request end boss. And if you have ever contributed to GitLab, or if you are planning to do so in the future, you will likely encounter me or one of my fellow end bosses. So that's it for me. Let's get to GitLab 8.6.
Cool. I'm going to close my webcam release, just so
sure.
just save some bandwidth.
I'm going to do
see you guys at the end.
Suggestion. All right, so now we should be back to just this presentation here. With every release, of course, we aim to include a lot of nice functionalities, some big, some small, some bug fixes, some major features, and GitLab 8.6 is no different. We have a changelog that has around 62 items. We had a patch release yesterday that already had something like 15 items as well. And of course, I would like to go through all of these. I would prefer to go through all of these, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to point out a couple of highlights. And it's one thing that's good to keep in mind is a couple of the goals we had with 8.6, or a couple of the themes around this release and the features in this release. And these are as follows. The first is greater confidentiality. The idea is to give you a little bit more control about who can see what, and most importantly, who cannot see what. Because in some cases, you want to protect some data from specific people or a group of people, for example, people outside of your company. Then we've also worked on improving organization using labels to allow you to better focus on the stuff that's actually interesting to you personally and interesting to you right now. We've had a couple of improvements around labels in previous releases as well, and we will be doing some in following releases, and I'm going to give you a couple of examples that in the demo later on. Of course, we're always working to make GitLab as easy to use as possible because it's a tool in your workflow. It is not something you use just for fun. It's something you use to get your work done better. So we have a lot of tweaks that make it a faster experience for you to use, an easier to use experience for you using the UI and performance improvements and some neat workflow enhancements that you will be very happy to see in a moment. So with all of that said, let's go to the demo. I'm going to move to a different screen here, and you should see, right, you are looking at a project dashboard in GitLab. You see 6 projects listed here. And let's pretend for a second that you work at a company that uses GitLab and that you are the admin in charge of that GitLab installation. This is probably not too far off the mark for a lot of you, so you should not have any trouble imagining you are this person. What you're looking at here is 6 projects. You see them listed here, and they are across 3 different departments, the top secret, other, and A department. And we are a company, let's say, of around 200 people. We trust all of our employees, so we want all of our employees to have access to every single project that we have. But we don't want outsiders and contributors to, competition to read what we're doing and what we've planned for upcoming releases, because that would, of course, put us at a competitive disadvantage. So what we've done is configured our GitLab installation in such a way that our employees have access to everything, every single project, and outside people don't. And to accomplish this, we have set every project to the internal visibility level, which means the project can be cloned by any logged-in user. And you see that for all of these 6 with the little shield icon. If we go into top secret project, you will see the same thing on the right here. And this is awesome. This means that if someone happens to know the URL for our GitLab install, and they would go to that URL, they would not be able to see anything without having an account. And of course, we have set up our GitLab in such a way that you can only create an account if you are actually an employee. For example, using LDAP or Active Directory or something along those lines. There is one little issue here, though, and that is that this does not this is not the case for the group that we're in, the top secret department. If we click on this link here at the top left and go to the group page, you will see that the group is actually public with the little globe here, which means that the group can be viewed by anyone without any authentication. So if you were to go to the URL for this GitLab installation and go to the Explore page, you would actually see every group in this company listed, which can give away a lot of information about the kind of departments we have. Now, Top Secret is not much of an informative name, and it's probably not a big deal if this name would come out. But of course, in a real-life environment, you would have a more descriptive name that would contain or could contain sensitive information. With 8.5, with GitLab 8.5, you are kind of stuck here. But with GitLab 8.6, we have introduced a really nice feature, which you can find in the settings page. And this is to set a group as private or internal. The visibility level that you likely know from projects and that have been available for projects for a long time is now also available for groups. If you mark your group as internal, this means that, like with projects, no one will be able to see it except for signed-in users, and as said, sign-in users are employees in our case. So let's just go ahead and do that. Mark this group as internal. This ensures that no one will know what's going on in this top secret department. So now we are safe from outside people, but what happens if we actually want to bring one specific outside person in? Let's consider this top secret project. This is a project that we are planning to launch in a couple of months, let's say, and here security is of paramount importance. So what we've decided to do is contract a security researcher or vulnerability researcher to go through our code and see if they can find any issues that we should definitely fix before this goes live. So this is an outside person, and we have an NDA with them which says they can not talk about this project with anyone else. But if we created an account for them on GitLab and we added them to this project, they would be a user. And for GitLab, there is no difference between an external user and an employee. So they would have access to any internal project and internal group, which is not a good idea because they may want to know about this top secret project, but there may be some stuff that is even more restrictive or stuff that they really just don't need to know about. With GitLab 8.6, this is no longer an issue because we have introduced that very thing I just mentioned, the concept of external users. If you go to the admin area in the top right, and we create a user or we edit an existing user, in our case I've already created an account for the security researcher, and then we go to their edit page, we'll have a new checkbox which reads basically what I said just now, external. External users cannot see internal or private projects unless access is explicitly granted. Also, external users cannot create projects or groups. This is, of course, exactly what we're looking for. Our security researcher should only have access to the project that we created, and there's no reason for them to see anything else or to create their own projects. So let's
Okay.
check this external checkbox and
I
continue.
just
Yes,
wanted
Heather,
to,
are there
yeah, I
any
just
questions?
wanted, yeah, I wanted to pause there because what you've shown
Of
us up
course.
until now, just in case anybody has any questions, what you've shown us is project configuration, how to configure projects to share them internally or to limit their public access. And now what we're looking at is the new 8.6 functionality of controlling the ability for external users to see this. If anyone has any questions before we move on, please do ask them in the questions panel. But I just wanted to, just wanted to point that out just in case you missed that.
Yeah,
Thank you very
right.
much.
So the two things that we have introduced up till now are group visibility level. So you are able to set more restrictive settings for who can see your groups and who cannot, and the possibility of marking a specific person as external. So the internal rule that any user on the system can see any internal project does not apply to these people because they are only interested in one specific project. So Heather, are there any questions at this point? I'm happy to answer any.
Actually, a question came through. Is this available for CE and EE?
Yes, everything I'm listing up till now is a CE feature. Everything I will talk about today is in the community edition, which means it's available for free and open source on our GitLab website. There is no enterprise edition, only stuff in this demo.
Brilliant, thank you.
All right, so if there's nothing else right now, I will just go on. We have checked the external checkbox here, and now I'm going to save these changes so that we have an external user in our security researcher. As mentioned, this person needs to be granted access explicitly to any project they're going to be working on. In our case, that is the top secret project I showed to you briefly earlier. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the dashboard by clicking the large GitLab logo here at the top. We're going to browse into the top secret project. We are going to the members page, and we are going to add this security researcher as a member. So in the add new user to project section up here, we will find the security user by their username, and we're going to give them project access. Now here you can select the amount of access, or the type of access that the security researcher will get. In this case, we are looking for the reporter level. As a guest, you are not actually to read the code, but you can create issues. As a developer, you are able to read code and write code and create issues. And in between is what we're looking for. The reporter needs to be able to create issues because, of course, they're going to be filing issues around security, but they don't need to actually write any code. So we're going to check reporter here and create an account for the security researcher on our team. And there you have it. The security researcher is now a project member for Top Secret Project. Now, because the security researcher is going to be looking for security issues, we're going to be using the issue tracker that we have in GitLab to track those issues. The upside of this is that everything is in a centralized place and that it's easy to reference these issues from other locations within GitLab. For example, a commit where you might reference the issue that it relates to, or a merge request, or something along those lines. So to keep the issue tracker organized, we're going to be using labels. As you can see, we already have labels for bug, which is top secret stuff that's not quite working yet, as well as features, proposals for new top secret functionality, and we want a third label by the name of security that our security researcher will use. So let's check this label filter here, which allows us to filter issues by any label. As you can see, we don't have a security label just now, but that should not stop us at all, because there's a create new link here that we're going to use to create a label while we are here. So we'll call it security. We're going to give it a slightly different red color from bug, and we're going to create it. Now, if you've been using GitLab for a little while, this is new functionality in GitLab 8.6 as well. Filtering by label has been possible for ages, but creating a label was always kind of cumbersome because you had to go through the labels page here on the left and then go through a little wizard to create a label. Now it's introduced into the label filter, so it's right there when you are looking to create or filter by a new label. So now we have a security label, and we can click it and we can filter by security. There are no issues yet, of course, but we expect the security researcher to create a number of these over the period that they are working on this assignment. And I happen to be, as the admin of this GitLab instance, I happen to be their contact person, and I want to be kept up to date on any issue that they find. So what I'm going to do is just look at this page a couple of times a day. Although that's probably not so good an idea, because that kind of takes me out of the other stuff I was doing. It would be much better if I was able to get notifications for any issues that our security researcher finds. So what I could do is I could ask him to, in every issue that he creates, mention my username by @dawe, which is in my case. If he puts that into an issue, I will get a notification. But I happen to know that I have a couple of colleagues who are interested about these issues as well, and I feel a bit bad asking our security researcher to mention 6 people in every issue he creates, because we're paying him to find issues. We're not paying him to remember our names. So this is a bit of an issue right now, or at least it would have been in GitLab 8.5, because with GitLab 8.6 we are introducing a feature that is called subscribe to labels. If we go to the label page on the left here, you will see all of the labels that we have listed, including security, which we just created. And on the right, you see a blue subscribe button. Pressing the subscribe button, subscribing to a label basically does what you would expect. Any new issues that are created with this label security attached, or any issues that are created and get assigned this label after the fact, will automatically send a notification to the inbox of everyone who has subscribed. So let's just go ahead and do that right now.
Yeah.
Yes, are there any questions, Heather?
Yeah, so we did, show, you're showing the label interface, which is really good here. There's a few questions that have come in, actually, and might be good to answer them before we move on. Starting with the label. The label that you've created here is project specific, and someone has asked about creating labels which are available globally. Can you describe how that's done?
All right, so we have 2 options here. We have, in the first place, labels are project specific, but because we recognize the need for kind of setting a standard for labels across project, we have the option of having global labels. You can find this by going to the admin area, and I will just show you really quick. If we go to the admin area at the top here, we will have an option called labels on the left. And any labels that we create here will automatically be copied onto any new project that you create. So if you set up a couple of labels here, these will be the template for any projects created after this. And that's how you can have global labels which are copied into any specific project. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah.
Anything else, Heather?
Yeah, another question. What makes a user an external user? You've described a use case where someone's a security researcher and you want to give them limited access. But what, I suppose, in essence, do we mean by an external user?
All right, so in GitLab we have the concept of internal projects and internal groups from 8.6 on. And what this means is that these projects are only accessible to people who have an account. This is mostly interesting in the case where you have kind of locked off signups, where you have connected to some kind of centralized authentication servers, for example, LDAP or Kerberos or, let's say, Active Directory, in which case you know that everyone who has an account on GitLab is an employee of the company. And in this case, these people can all have access to any internal project on the server, but some people are not actually employees in this sense and should not have all of that access. So external users are users who you do not want to have access to any project in GitLab. And this counts for examples like the contractor case that I mentioned, but also if you are working on a lot of client projects, you might want to get your client in on one specific project that you're building for them, but you would not want them to see any of the other projects you're working on. This is not a very good use case for this. Oh. I hope that explains the difference.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And someone asked about a future feature about creating user groups to have a quick add of, if you want to say like add a group of users to a project. And I think that's pretty much what groups are actually for. But I just want to say, for people who are asking questions about future features, we will show you again to go to the GitLab CE or EE issue queue or issue tracker and ask your questions in there, and feature proposals. They're more than welcome. Sometimes we can't get to all of them during a webcast, but hopefully you'll get your questions answered. So for no further ado, you can go ahead and show us what you're going to do with this label.
Right. I do want to quickly comment on the question you just raised about having
Sure.
teams and sharing projects with specific teams, even if the team is outside of the group the project is in. So imagine you have a couple of departments, and every department has a list of its members, of course. And Department A has a couple of projects, but they are working on that together with Department B. So you would want everyone from Department B to have access as well, but you don't want to go through the hassle of adding every user one by one. This is actually a new thing in GitLab 8.6 as well, or at least it's new to the Community Edition. In GitLab Community Edition 8.6, we introduced the feature to share a project with another group. And I'm going to show you that real quick. If we go to Settings here, you will have an option here that says Groups. And in Groups, we can add another group that will also have access to this project. So, for example, we are in the top secret department now, and I want to share this with everyone in the other department, and everyone from the other department can be a developer on this project. I hit share, and that will take place right away. This has been an enterprise edition for a little while, but based on requests from the community, we have decided to move this to the community edition because we think it is valuable enough and also useful enough to anyone, whatever size your company is. So a very good question, because this is something in 8.6 that I would not have mentioned otherwise.
Brilliant. Okay.
So without further ado, I will continue with where we were going just now. I will go back to the project. I was on the labels page. So we have the labels here. I am subscribed to this label, and I would like to do one little last thing, which is a feature from GitLab 8.5, which is add a description here. I've already got this in my autocomplete, which is a description for the security label saying security issues found by a security researcher. And let's save this real quick. What happens is that in the list of issues, this description will be labeled. Whoa, 1 second. In the list of labels, this description will be listed alongside the label name. And as you can expect from GitLab, any usernames will be linked to their profile. So this makes it easy to add a little bit of context around the label to kind of describe the cases in which it should be used, if that's not immediately clear from the one name label itself. So at this point, from the admin's perspective, everything is set up for our researcher to start finding bugs and start, playing around with the project, see if there's anything that we might have overlooked. So I'm going to switch roles at this moment, and I'm going to pretend to be that security researcher. Let me switch to another display. All right, here we are. We are at the sign-in page again. And what we will do in a second is sign in as a security researcher. But first I want to show you something different. I mentioned before with the group visibility level that this affects what groups are visible to anonymous users. And obviously right now I am anonymous because I'm not signed in at all. So if I go to the Explore page, I should see nothing listed here. And that is the case. If I go to the All tab for projects, there's nothing here. If I go to groups, there's nothing here either. Which means our feature works. No groups leaked, no project leaked, everything is safe. Now let's try to sign in as this security researcher, and let's verify that they don't have access to anything but the project they were added to. So I enter the password that you cannot know, and let's sign in. Whoa, this is weird. Maybe, yeah, I missed the ER at the end here. My bad. Password, and then sign in. All right, that worked. Signed in successfully. And as expected, we are only seeing one project under Explore Projects. And even if we went to the All tab, there would only be one project. Same deal if we go to Groups and then Explore Groups. There is only one group that we can see, despite us having previously seen that there were actually 3 groups and 6 projects. So far, everything works fine with the external project. They cannot gain access to any other project in GitLab. So let's just dive into this top secret project, because after all, I am the security researcher, and this is what I was hired to look into. So let's start off by going to Files, because we're looking for vulnerability in the code base, and of course you can find this here. So this lists all of the files in this repository, starting with a directory called config, an AWS Credentials YAML file that sounds very interesting, and a README. I think you know where I'm going with this. This AWS Credentials file should definitely not be here. AWS is, for some of you who may not know, Amazon Web Services, which is basically Amazon's hosting platform. And if we're storing the credentials in this repository, that means all of our employees have access to these. All 200, even though this may store some very, very sensitive data. So let's just go into this file and verify that it is as bad as I thought. Yep, we have the access key ID and the secret access key, which basically allow anyone access to data from our AWS storage. So we found our issue. We found our first issue, and we haven't even been on this project for a minute. The people working here must be really incompetent. So we're going to file an issue about this major issue. So we go to the issues page here, and we're going to hit new issue. Let's think of a title that is kind of descriptive. Let's do something like this. AWS Credentials. Typing is always harder under pressure, but I think we'll manage. AWS credentials are stored inside the repository. I made another error. Let me just fix it real quick. All right. And for good measure, let's name this file where these errors are, which is AWS credentials.yaml. And let's say AWS creds are in this file. They shouldn't be. Of course, typing is hardest when there's people looking. They shouldn't be. Now, of course, we've made the deal with our GitLab admin that we would label everything as security, so that's exactly what we'll do right now. So now we can go ahead and submit this issue. But there is one little problem here, which is that 200 people, all the employees of this company, have access to this project and hence all of its issues. So if we did that, 200 people would now know that the AWS credentials for this entire company probably are here and can be picked up and can be abused in any way. This is where another really, really nice GitLab 8.6 feature comes in, which is the concept of confidential issues. Maybe you've already spotted this checkbox here. If not, I am now pointing it out to you. This is the possibility to mark an issue as confidential and only visible to team members. And this brings the amount of people who will know about this vulnerability or this leak of security credentials from 200 people to, say, around 10. And of course, this is something we want because the fewer people, the smaller the chances that these credentials will be abused. The less people who know, the faster we can rotate the credentials and we can delete this file from the project without any harm having been done. So let's just go ahead and mark this as confidential and submit the issue. So now we are redirected back to the issue, to the newly created issue, and we can see that it's confidential since there's a little eye icon here with a stroke through it. We can see that it's labeled as security on the right. And if you've been paying close attention, you have figured out that since we assigned the security label, the admin who subscribed to that label should now have gotten an email notification alerting them of this issue. Now, the case is as such that there is no email set up on this GitLab instance, so we're just going to pretend for a second that this actually happened. And we're going to switch back into the role of the GitLab admin, who is still looking at the labels index on this other screen. So they got this alert about the security issue. So for our case, let's just click the security label here. So we filter issues by the tag security, the security label. And indeed, we see a list of issues here, including that confidential issue that was just created a second ago. Of course, I have no idea what this issue is about because I'm no longer the security researcher. So let's click it and dig in. AWS creds are in AWS Credentials YAML. They shouldn't be. Well, obviously the security researcher is right, and I'm kind of embarrassed by me and my team that we let this slip. So what I want to do is to solve this as quickly as possible. And luckily with GitLab, we can do this all from the web interface. So because we use the GitLab flow, which I suggest you do as well because it works very well for projects like this, we will do this using a feature branch. This means that the first step would be to create a branch, then commit the changes into that branch, then submit a merge request, and then the merge request will be merged or accepted by someone else on the team. So the first step would be to create a branch. With 8.5, this looks like this. We go to the commits tab here, we go to the branches tab right here, we hit the new branch button on the right, and now we have to come up with a branch name. And if you've done any amount of programming, you know that naming is one of the hardest things there are. So let's just go with AWS creds in repo. Apparently I already used it before. But this is a slightly cumbersome process. We had to have 3 clicks and we had to think about the name, which is always annoying, and we had to do this amount of keystrokes. So let's take a couple step backs and see how this changed with GitLab 8.6. So I'm back one page, back another page, and back one more, and we're back at the issue. If you've been looking very, very well at this page to see what changed from the last time you used GitLab, you will have noticed a little new branch button on the right here. And if I hover over it, it will show AWS credentials are stored inside the repository -9. This is a button that will create a branch by that name when I click it. And the name is special because the name includes the title of the issue I'm trying to fix, and it ends in the ID of the issue in question. And this will be used in the future to kind of link this issue to the branch I'll be working on. You'll see an example of this integration in a minute. So let's hit this new branch button and wait a few short seconds until we end up at the file index on that branch. As you can see, we are now on the AWS Credentials branch. and this is the full name you see listed here. So let's get rid of these AWS credentials because they should definitely not be in our repository. Let's open up this file, and indeed it has these access keys, and we will delete this file straight away. We have a nice little red delete button on the right here that we will hit, and now we will need to write a commit message. You already see delete AWS credentials YAML here, but this is not actually a suggestion. This is just a placeholder, so you kind of know, where to go from here. But of course, we want something a little bit more descriptive, so let's do that. Don't include AWS creds in repository. We should store them somewhere else. And there's another typo that I'll fix right away. Okay, for the target branch, we will just leave this value because we will work on this branch and at the end of the process create a new merge request. So let's hit delete file, and then after a few short seconds, we should see a notice alerting us the file has been successfully deleted. Now the file is gone, but we kind of have to make the assumption that this file was used somewhere. So let's dig in further and see where it was used. It's not the README, because the README is rendered here, and it wouldn't make sense for the README to use any credentials. So maybe the config folder will be more helpful. Indeed, there is an AWS RB file here that looks very promising. Let's go in and see what's up. Well, if you read any Ruby, or if you can kind of gather from context what's going on here, this is reading the file that we just deleted. It's then loading the YAML out of this, which turns the YAML into a hash that Ruby can work with. It's getting these two values, and it's using them to set the credentials for our AWS connection. So obviously, this should change to some different method of getting these credentials. So that's what I'll do right now. We have a little edit button here that I will hit, and we will be brought into the web editor. These first few lines are no longer relevant because they were a bad idea in the first place, so I'll just go ahead and delete those. We still need the access key ID and secret access key, however. And to do this, we're going to use the environment of the machine that this script will end up running on. And for good measure, I'm going to prefix this with AWS, because that's kind of a convention. And now the script should work without any file storage. It will just take it from the environment, which means the only machine that needs to know these credentials is the single machine that this code will run on. And ideally, the people with access to this machine is very, very low. At least much better than the 200 people who had access to this AWS credentials file before. So let me just write a little commit message. Use AWS creds from environment rather than creds file. And we're going to commit it to that very same branch. So I'll hit commit changes. And we should see something change in a second. Right, there you go. This looks a lot better. So now we are kind of done with our fix, and we want to create a merge request so some colleague can review it. If you are paying close attention, you see a blue create merge request button here on the top right, and we could use that, but I'm going to show you one more thing first. If we go back to issues, and we go back to the confidential issue that was created before, you will see something new, which is this little related branch section that lists the branch we just created. And the way that it can kind of know about this is through the -9. Excuse me, Heather, was there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, while you have that pointed out, I had a really interesting question I think is relevant here. Someone was wondering about these automatic branch names. Like, how is that automatic branch name created? You're about to point out, obviously, that's the issue number, but someone's wondering, is it possible to configure maybe what these patterns are?
Right now, as you can kind of see, it's just the title into a branch-like format followed by a dash and then the issue number. It's not currently possible to customize this because we add as little options as possible and kind of try to pick a good default ourselves. But of course, if you have suggestions for something that may work better in your case, feel free to post it on the issue tracker. But right now, this is the only available format. I hope that answers the question. Anything else, Heather?
No, that's great.
All right, then I'll just continue. As you can see, it will have been able to list this branch name here because of the -9 at the end, which is the same issue ID for this issue. You'll also see that it lists started branch blah 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 here, which indicates to people reading this issue that someone already started working on it even before a merge request had been submitted. Because often a merge request can take a little while, and there is this kind of overlap period where people don't know that someone's working on it, and of course we don't want double work, and it's good to know that people have picked this issue up so quickly. So if we click this link here right now, we will see something nice. And the thing we will see is that we can get an overview of what has changed in this branch already, even before a merge request has been created. Of course, this is just a compare feature, but it's nice to get this view without having to go through the activity feed yourself or have to look through the new branches that were pushed yourself. Something else that's really nice to see here is syntax highlighting in diffs. This was actually introduced in GitLab 8.4, but I'd still like to point out just how awesome this is. And of course, we support this for all of the different syntax highlighting themes that we have. So if you are a lover of dark syntax highlighting themes, you are all set if you change that in your personal profile settings. But I think that we are done with this feature and we can start and create that merge request. There is another button here at the top right to create a merge request. We saw one on the page we were at just now. There is a couple of other places in GitLab where this button will surface, but we're already here, so let's just use this button, create a merge request. I press it, and a short second later, we are on the new merge request page. As you can see, the title has already been filled in based on the name of the branch. In this case, this is maybe not the best title, so I'll just write something different. Store AWS creds, or rather load AWS creds from environment rather than file in repo. That sounds about right. And if you're looking at the description, you will see that it has been pre-filled with clauses #9. In this case, hash will be used to identify issues. So this means we're telling GitLab, or rather we're telling everyone reading this issue, that this merge request is in response to issue number 9. And GitLab is smart enough to know what you mean by this. Of course, if you have a merge request that solves some issue, you would want that issue to be closed afterwards. And in long time ago, you would have to actually go through this issue yourself and close it manually after the merge request was accepted. But with this feature that GitLab has, where you can write clauses #issue number, when someone accepts this merge request, the issue will be closed automatically. And I will show that to you in a second as well. So I think that at this point our description is all right, our title is all right. Let's just add that security label to be consistent in our label use. And it looks like the merge request is basically everything we wanted from it. So let's submit it and continue. As you can see, the issue was created, or rather the merge request was created with the title we were looking for, the description, as well as the security label. And you can see here right below the accept button that accepting this merge request will close issue number 9. If we go back to issue number 9, we will see something interesting that's changed. A minute ago, it showed one related branch, and now that's gone away and has been moved aside for a one related merge request. Because we now know the merge request that was created for the specific branch, we can show the user that's viewing this issue a little more information, like the title, the commit status, the CI status that might be appropriate, and there's a little mention here that also shows that at this point, a minute ago, the merge request was added around 7 minutes after the branch itself was created. So now let's go back to that merge request, and I will prove to you that that closing feature works. We are going to accept this merge request and close that issue automatically. GitLab will handle that for you. Let's check this little checkbox here, because after this has been merged, the branch itself is no longer relevant because the commits will have been added to the master branch. So we hit accept merge request, and this will do a little bit of checking in the background, and it will create the merge commit, it will push it to your repo, and the page reloads, and now it will show that this merge request was merged by Daoman less than a minute ago, and the changes were merged into master. And if we now go to that issue number 9, we can see if everything worked as we intended it, and indeed it did. The issue has been closed, and at the bottom here it shows what merge request closed it as well as what commit closed it. In our case, this commit is the merge commit, and it's really nice to kind of have this context for how this issue ended up closed. So that's everything I wanted to show you about GitLab 8.6 for now. I think this is a pretty nice story because it includes all of these 8.6 features that are new in 8.6. So Heather, at this point, are there any questions that people would like answers to?
Yeah, absolutely. Some more questions actually about labels. One person asks,
of course.
What about the labels? Do they show up in the Git repository, or are they in GitLab only? And as you've shown, this is something we see in the GitLab interface, and so it's actually not going to show up in Git. Is there any other relationship between label configuration and your Git repository?
No, not really. They are pretty much separate. The labels basically only apply to your issues, your merge requests, and your milestones, which I will not go into right now, but it's kind of on the issue tracking, code review side of things, not on the repository storage side of things. If you have any suggestions for a way to connect labels to specific commits or specific files or anything else in the Git repository, I'm very happy to hear it. Just submit an issue to the issue tracker.
Brilliant. And there are some questions actually about syncing global labels and project labels. So for example, someone was saying it'd be nice to have a sync button to, if you have a global label to apply to a project, or a project label, apply it to the global level. And possibly wondering actually, are there conflicts that could be created? What if you had the same label already in a project and you recreated that label globally? So actually 2 different people asking similar question about syncing between project and global level.
Yeah, so I was anticipating this question because when I was explaining the global labels, the obvious missing piece there was having this affect existing projects. This is not supported in GitLab right now, but I don't see a reason why it couldn't be. So if there's not an issue already, file one yourself. You have a good point, Heather, about the conflicts, but I think that since the only thing that could conflict here is the name, we can just assume that if a label by that name already exists, we just don't override it. And any new labels, we will just go ahead and create them on the project. Right. Good idea, just submit it on the issue tracker, and I'm happy to talk about it.
Cool. And a final question actually about the security feature. We talked just briefly there about the relationship between what happens in GitLab and your, working from the command line. Is that security feature of not showing or showing the project applicable to someone's access from the command line?
Yeah, it is. It completely is. The visibility of a project, which can be either public or private or internal, directly relates to the access someone will have when they try to pull or push or fetch from your Git repository. Because you need to identify yourself when you push or pull over SSH or HTTP. In the first case, using an SSH key. In the second case, using your username and password. We know who you are, and we can check whether you have access to this project. And then all of that applies on the web interface as well as the Git command line.
Excellent, really good. I noticed, we're bumping up against the original time the webcast was supposed to finish, and yet we still have more to the presentation. So feel free to stick around. But of course, we will send you a recording. So if you do have to go on, that's totally okay too. Dao, would you like to continue and show us more of the features that are in 8.6?
Of course. What I would like to do first is give you a quick little recap of what we just showed you. Let's go one slide further. The first thing we dug into was group visibility level. This is a really useful feature when you don't want any information to leak to anyone except for your employees. If you want your employees to be able to see everything, you can set your projects and groups to the internal level, and anyone outside of the company, anyone without an account, will not be able to see anything. This is a really nice increase in security in GitLab 8.6. Then we have external users that kind of tie into this, because if we're using this internal projects and groups, and a lot of companies do this because they like to inner source. They like to have all of their employees have access to all of their code, so they can kind of work together or take cues from the ways other teams do stuff, and this can really improve the overall code quality at your company. But sometimes, like I mentioned, you have people who kind of are not employees and who this should not apply to, in which case you can mark them as external. Examples here are clients or contractors, or some security researcher in this case. This is where the external user feature will be very, very useful. Then the third thing I showed is better dropdowns. The example I showed was around label filtering and the ability to quickly create a label as well. You will find that all over GitLab we have been working on replacing the dropdowns with more powerful, more smooth, more polished dropdowns that will allow you to get your work done quicker, basically. Then the fourth thing we showed was subscribe to a label, which makes it really easy to focus on just the stuff you are interested in. If you are primarily interested in security issues, but 100 issues are created every day on your issue tracker, only maybe 2 or 3 of which maybe security related, you can now use this feature to stay up to date on just those and not get distracted by anything else. The fifth thing we looked at is confidential issues, and this is kind of related to the security and access aspects of the first 2 features that we looked at. The idea here being that in some cases, even if you have set up your project so that everyone in the company can view them, you might want to have something that should be need to know. Only a few people should know it, and it can only get public after it's been patched, for example. Another example here is if you are working on an open source project, if you're using GitLab for an open source project, or if you have your project hosted on gitlab.com, if your public issue tracker is public, like I say, any issues people file will be public as well. So if someone files a security issue there, everyone will be able to see it even before you have had time to patch it, which allows the entire world basically to abuse that vulnerability in the meantime. So if you have an open source project, the confidential issues feature will be very useful to keep that security issue under the wraps for as long as possible, or at least as long as needed. Then the sixth feature in 8.6 is new branch button, which is not revolutionary, but which will cut a couple of steps from a very common workflow if you like to work using the web interface. For example, at GitLab, we manage our entire website and our blog using the web interface because a lot of non-technical people are working on this as well who do not necessarily have Git set up locally or are not as happy working with the command line as they are the web UI. And this will save them a lot of time to fix stuff like typos or to just address any issue that is created and that can be easily fixed from the web interface. So these are the 6 major GitLab features I showed just now. Are there any questions at this point, Heather?
There are actually a few questions. This is, going back in a way to, well, actually there was one question, in fact, about EE pricing. And just to say for anybody who's missed it, our pricing did change. Someone recognized that there was a change just this week, and you can purchase licenses for single users. So that is definitely a positive thing. Hopefully you can join us, I suppose, as EE license users. That would be fantastic. Someone actually asked about GitLab being available in other languages. It's a little bit more of a tangent to what you've been showing, but is that a possibility in the future?
It is something we are interested in. It is also on our roadmap, but it's sufficiently hard that it's not a priority right now and that we haven't actually scheduled it for a specific release. You have to imagine that inside GitLab there are thousands of little pieces of text, ways that sentences are formatted. You have things like the automatic system notes on issues when someone mentions it. All of this stuff is just hard-coded into English right now because from the start we did not take the internationalization that would have been better in this case. So it is gotten so hard that we are focusing on different stuff. It is something we're interested in. We are very aware that not everyone speaks English or that people prefer to use a product like this in their native language. To do that, just have a look on the GitLab issue tracker or the direction page. I think there will be a link to it there. You can find a list of all of our, basically our roadmap, our direction page on about.gitlab.com/direction. And I think that this is listed there as well.
Brilliant. Excellent.
Anything else at this point, Heather?
Yeah, just one more question. If this person asks if they're using Jira to GitLab integration, will their issues also get closed?
Yeah, they will actually. And if you use Jira with GitLab, of course in Jira your issue names, your issue numbers are prefixed with a couple of capital letters. And if you have your Jira and GitLab set up, if you have the integration set up, if you write close, Jira tag dash issue number in a GitLab merge request, and someone then closes that GitLab merge request, this will result in your Jira issue being closed. The same goes if you include this in a commit that you push to the master branch. If you write closes Jira 123 or closes hash 123 for a GitLab issue, or fixes or resolves, or basically anything along those lines you can come up with, that issue will indeed be closed.
Fantastic. Very good. Thank you so much.
All right. Anything else at this point, Heather?
That's all for now.
All right, then I would continue. The next thing I'm going to show you is because we covered these 6 things in the demo, but there are a couple of nice things that I would just like to quickly point out. The first of those I will demonstrate with a couple of screenshots is an improved mobile experience. What you're looking at here is on the left an issue, and then on the right you see kind of the sidebar popped out where you can configure the assignee, the milestone, the labels, that kind of thing. If you've been following GitLab for a little while, you will know that with version 8.0, which was released back in September of 2015, we had a big UI overhaul. And at this point, from that point on, we've been paying a lot of time paying a lot of attention to the way GitLab works and looks on the desktop, and the mobile experience has kind of gotten the short end of the stick. With 8.6, we have a greatly improved, greatly increased front-end development capacity. We've been hiring a couple of great front-end developers lately, so the mobile experience is getting a little bit more love. And you will definitely see that if you upgrade to 8.6 or if you're using GitLab.com from your mobile device. Of course, there is still a ways to go. There are still a lot of places where GitLab is kind of flunky on your mobile device, but it is definitely something we are working on, and you will be glad to see this if you work on the go a lot. So that is one of the things I would like to highlight. The next one is improved performance. As you've seen last month, and as you will see this month again, we have been focusing on increasing GitLab performance a lot lately because we recognize that it used to not be very good, especially if you have a lot of projects or a lot of users, or if you have anything but a small installation. We realize, because at GitLab.com we run a large installation as well, that this is extremely important, especially like I mentioned, because GitLab is a tool in your workflow. It should not be in the way of you getting your work done. If you check out the blog, you will see a couple of blog posts from the 8.6 release about the kind of performance improvements we make if you're interested in the technical details behind those. If you're not interested in the technical details, you will definitely be interested in getting your work done quicker and just the entire GitLab experience being faster. So get your GitLab admin to upgrade to 8.6 quickly because you will not regret it. The third thing I would like to quickly point out, which doesn't make for a nice demo material because it's kind of on the back-end code side, but which is a really neat feature, is the ability to easily deploy from a GitLab CI script to Kubernetes. The idea here is that if you use Kubernetes to manage your deployments, you can now really easily write your GitLab CI script in such a way that it will be deployed directly to Kubernetes using Redspread. And this is completely covered in our 8.6 blog post, so definitely do check that out. The last two things I would like to quickly point out is the ability to delete and move issues. Both of these sound fairly elementary, especially deleting issues, and it's kind of surprising we didn't have them before, but we were kind of stubborn about closing issues being the better option because then you maintain your history and you don't destroy any data. But in some cases, especially if you are, for example, dealing with a lot of spam on your issue tracker, deleting issues is very valuable. Moving issues is, of course, really useful when you have a couple of related projects and outside users may not always file in the exact place where you would have preferred it. With this feature, you can easily move an issue, its description, and all of its discussion to another project without losing any history, but without cluttering the original issue tracker. And that is basically everything that I wanted to show for 8.6. So at this point, I'm happy to ask and answer any questions. Are there any questions, Heather?
There is actually a question about integrating with Mesosphere Marathon. I didn't know if you know anything about that. We can also follow up by email if people have questions as well.
It's definitely not my area of expertise, but we are working on a lot of functionality that we call GitLab Deploy, and the idea here is to kind of get the entire deployment pipeline into GitLab, to kind of make CI super powered so that it can indeed deploy using a wide range of systems, including stuff to do with Mesosphere. Just check out the GitLab Deploy issue that is also linked from our direction page, which I mentioned earlier, and otherwise you can always follow up via email if you prefer that.
Brilliant, excellent. And if we go on to the next section, I appreciate folks who are sticking around. I want to make sure to talk to you about GitLab Pages. And I just wonder, maybe you're already using GitLab Pages. Have you checked it out yet? Because it did actually come in, actually was released in GitLab 8.3. And then you may have noticed we added CNAME custom domain support in 8.5. And, since then, actually, if you see on our next slide, we've added some excellent resources. So we have an improved documentation. We have also created a group on the next slide.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
There we go.
So
Okay, better on
That was
slides
controlling
from.
the presentation now. Thank you so much. So
Well, the thing is, I wasn't controlling the presentation. It was kind of the problem, but I'll pay better attention now.
this has been such an amusing webcast. So
It has.
yeah. So what I really like about this, check out gitlab.com/group/pages just to see that you can use plain HTML. You can use any static site generator. We've got examples of Jekyll, Middleman, Hugo, Hexo, Middlesmith, really you name it, and you can build it with GitLab. And the reason is that underneath your static sites are being generated with GitLab CI, which is freely available as part of GitLab. That means it's freely available for GitLab CE and EE users, and there's even shared runners which are available on gitlab.com. And I was presenting about this at a Ruby meetup recently, and I think I said it was free maybe 4 or 5 times, and people still kept on asking, yes, it is, it's free. And the hosting of these sites is also free. So do check that out. On the next slide, just to show you some of the naming patterns that you can check out on our documentation page. The new revised documentation is absolutely brilliant. And it helped you just get started on using GitLab Pages. I was brand new to it myself. In fact, I'd never used GitLab CI before. So I do think that if you're brand new to CI, this is a nice way to get started. There's some examples already there for you. And I did mine the incredibly lazy way. I simply forked an example project, and with a little configuration, my site was ready to go. So there's a nice way to get started. We're going to have a blog post soon to tell you more about that. And this is kind of a nice segue into the community news section next. Because what we'll show you is, our mantra is everyone can contribute. We published our strategy document recently and clarified our mission, that is to change all creative work to read-only, from read-only to read-write, so that everybody can contribute. And that's really important for our community of users as an open source project. If you've ever contributed to an open source project, you might know that really awesome feeling of ownership you get when you see, hey, I did that, I participated, I made that difference. And that's why I want to highlight in our next slide. Marcia Ramos is our MVP this month, and she's made a great, actually the Pages documentation that I just showed you was part of the contributions that she's made this month. And I think this is nice because it shows that you can make significant contributions to any open source project, and especially GitLab, beyond just code. So it's really proud to have Marcia recognized for her contributions, and hopefully set a really great example for the community. And some other really good community news, in case you missed it, the GitLab Shop is now open. We're seeing more and more pictures of our Tanuki mascot in the wild out there. On the left here, you can see my colleague, Emily. Emily's actually managing the GitLab Shop, so if you have any questions about it, you'll be talking with her. She said the baseball shirt is incredibly soft, which is great to hear. And in the center here, we have a picture from Travis, who's allowed us to use his picture, his unboxing photo showing his new GitLab shirt. And then on the right, we can see Steve's friend, Jeeve, has found a nice way to wear a GitLab sticker on his forehead. So, we really appreciate you sharing these pictures and for purchasing the products that are there. And, it makes us so proud that you're interested in sharing your love for GitLab. So thank you very, very much for that. So again, thank you very much. As I said a few times, I suppose the recording and slides will be sent to you if you're watching this live, and you can check out our blog if you want to see those soon. And I think that's pretty much all we have time for today. Checking out if there's any questions. A lot of enthusiasm about GitLab Pages. Someone said they wish there was a cool button. They loved the demo that you did there, Dawa. Thank you so much, people. Seems like, yeah, well, I think if there's anything else, if they're especially about different feature requests, we'll be in touch with you by email. So thank you so much, everybody. And Dawa, was there anything else you wanted to add?
No, not really. Just that I always enjoy doing this, and I would like to apologize for the kind of technical issues that we have, that we had. Time zones are always difficult, and This was a nice demonstration actually of the kind of issues you can have with a globally distributed company, because these things happen to us not often, but they do happen sometimes. This is an example of that.
That's right.
But
That's right.
thank you all for bearing with us and spending 15 minutes without us here to kind of talk to you. Thank you all for those who stayed after the end as well. We are very happy with all of you.
Brilliant. Thank you all so much, and we'll hopefully see you at the next one. Okay. Bye bye.
Bye bye.